AEW Fight Forever is a lovable mess. It's a semi-tribute to the wrestling games I grew up loving and have in fact talked about on this channel, and there's a lot to like about it. Unfortunately, the game is plagued with mediocre presentation, an incredibly bare-bones story mode, and even a shockingly hollow create-a-wrestler mode. In the age of games coming out practically incomplete more often than not, it's disappointing to play the first licensed game from a major promotion besides WWE in years, and for it to come out sort of half-baked. The first thing that you'll notice is that the game doesn't look great. It's not terrible at all. I think some of the models work better than others, and they were clearly going for a less realistic look compared to the WWE 2K games, which I don't think is a bad approach. I just think it's pretty bland and sterile looking. I think they either should have gone all in on the arcadey visuals a la WWE All-Stars, or put more detail into the characters' environments like the modern WWE titles. As it stands, I think the middle-of-the-road approach is doing the game a slight disservice. That being said, it really does seep into the background after a while, and that's thanks to the great gameplay. In a lot of ways, it does feel like a modern continuation of the classic Aki N64 games that I love so much, but it's not exact. They even brought in the director of No Mercy to be a consultant on the project, which I think was a really cool move. Of course, THQ and Yukes have a great track record when it comes to good wrestling games, so the gameplay engine being fun was not a surprise. The controls are different, but it has the same pick-up and play feel of older and more arcadey wrestling titles. Even though the 2K games have their fans, I'm glad that there's a space now for something that's a bit more casual and fun just for the sake of it. I just think there's a lot of work to do. Clearly, we live in an age where video games are always released as a work in progress. Barely over a week out from the game's release, we are already getting teased with new content, adding more game modes and wrestlers. This is a cool thing, assuming it's a free update, but it's symptomatic of a larger problem, which is unfortunately shown throughout the game at this current time. This game suffers from a severe lack of content. Right now it feels like a skeleton. Yes, we have a solid foundation, but there's no heft to it. There's a few decent match types, including the barbed wire death match, which thankfully looks cooler than real life. But it doesn't even come close to the amount of interesting and unique match types you would see in, say, Here Comes the Pain, for example. Same developer, 20 years later, and significantly less content. This is unfortunately a pattern for the game. Many people have lambasted the piss-poor create-a-wrestler mode, and yeah, it's incredibly barren. Although I did have fun with the entrances and moveset modes. Speaking of entrances, for some reason they don't fully walk all the way to the ring. It ends before they even make it down the ramp. It's not a huge deal, but the game has been delayed so many times you'd figure they'd add some extra animations here. I haven't seen wrestler entrances this barren since SmackDown 2. This lack of polish is unfortunately compounded in the Road to Elite mode, this game's story mode. It's super short and trivial. You go through a few pre-made scenarios and feuds, and then it just kinda ends after like 2 hours. It's a far cry from the excellent season modes of Shut Your Mouth, Here Comes the Pain. Hell, I'd even take SmackDown vs. Raw 08's 24/7 mode over this. Speaking of 24/7 mode, there's a neat little system in place here that reminds me of that. You can work out or go eat or play minigames before matches, and this is actually a pretty decent way to break up the pacing of the game. I actually don't mind these minigames. They're not required or anything, and most of them are pretty fun. Unfortunately, all this extra stuff isn't enough to save what is ultimately a repetitive and boring story mode that leaves a lot to be desired. I've heard arguments that it's short to incentivize replaying, but honestly, I don't have a huge urge to go back and do it again. At this current time, this is a fun wrestling game and nothing more. I could see myself booting it back up from time to set up crazy spots and play with friends. One thing worth mentioning is the roster. I don't follow AEW too closely, though I enjoy a good bit of what I've seen, but from what I can tell, it's pretty solid. You got all the guys that made the company what it is now, along with some legends that the company has signed over the years. They even managed to get Cody Rhodes in there, which is pretty cool. It's just a shame you're kinda locked to what's already pre-made, because the Create-a-Wrestler mode is so bad that it's almost not even worth using. I just accidentally made Ben Affleck and ran with it for story mode. One thing that's objectively awesome about some of the 2K games is their immense create suites. I remember in the days of 2K14, me and my buddies would pass the controller and take turns making truly absurd characters, which is something that never fails to be fun in these games. I know I'm really honing in on this Create-a-Wrestler thing, but it's just so disappointing to have a created wrestler mode that's worse than WCW Mayhem. It's 2023 and we shouldn't let this kind of thing slide. That's not to say I'm gonna put the game down forever and stop playing, or that it isn't worth buying for some people, but some is the key word there. It's incredibly hard to justify the steep $60 price tag when, quite frankly, this game feels like a budget title. Not a bad one, but like it should have been at least $20 to $30 cheaper. If the game was $30, I'd easily recommend it to just about anyone. But as it stands, you gotta be really nerdy about this shit to feel your money was well spent. Which is a shame, because like I mentioned earlier, the foundation is here. It's just a shame that we have to wait even longer for them to actually do something great with it. Thanks for watching. Sorry about the lack of uploads recently. I'm looking to get into a groove where I'm hopefully dropping about one video a month. I'm currently working on a video about Halo and will probably take a break from wrestling videos for a bit, but I'll definitely be looking at the SmackDown titles in the future if that's something y'all would like to see.